Today I have on the program Gary Klein. Now, I came across Gary Klein's work originally when I was researching decision making and expanding my academic horizons on that subject. Gary's done some incredible work with naturalistic decision making, just how do we make decisions naturally. But his latest book is called Seeing What Others Don't. It's a book about insight, and I was particularly excited to come across that name quite simply because it's something that it was familiar to me. I'd go into companies and organizations and see what others couldn't, and I couldn't figure out why nobody else could see it. And so Gary's book is incredibly helpful at shedding light on what the dynamics are, both for a person, an individual's ability to see insights, and also for a company. So let's start with Gary. Let's start with just jumping into, when you talk about insights, what do you mean, and how does that pertain to business today?
Okay, so an insight is an unexpected shift in the way we understand things. We haven't planned for it. Sometimes we're not even looking or working on a problem, and something happens, and all of a sudden we say, now I see what's been going on, or, oh, that's what's happening. So it comes without warning. It comes, we haven't been, deliberately working at it, and all of a sudden, there's that aha moment, and we understand things in a way that we didn't before. And the new understanding really lets us make sense of things that were puzzling us, and it allows us to anticipate what might be happening. And it's more accurate, it's more complete, and it allows us to be more successful. So that's what insights are about. So I want to go back to the issue that you raised when you were introducing this, is you'd go into organizations and you'd see things that others didn't. And I was just starting to think about why that happens. And when we have an insight, all of a sudden we come to an understanding that we didn't have before, but it's also an insight that other people didn't have before. And I think what happens in the organizations when you look around in organizations is people gradually grow up thinking in a certain way, and if there are any anomalies or discrepancies, they explain those away. And so they hold on to their beliefs, and they just continue in that path, even though there's all these inconsistencies. And so you, as an acute observer, an outsider, can come in, and you haven't been going down that garden path with them. And so it's not at all surprising that you would see things that others don't. Now, you asked me also about why it matters, why it would matter to businesses, what value would insights have to companies. And I have two responses. There's a simple response. I'll start with that insights are one of the major ways that companies obtain innovations. So insights can help companies come up with innovations. Second, insights can help companies diagnose problems that have been vexing them, and they can see, here's how we've been getting in our own way, or here's what's the culprit. And then another way is insights can help us spot opportunities, things that we hadn't been thinking about or wondering about, and all of a sudden somebody makes a connection and they say, if we did it this way, look at what the outcome might be, and now they're off into a new direction. But I want to give you a few examples of how insights achieve those, but then I want to go into the second value that insights have to companies. And an example would be, an example that I use in the book is you've got these two police officers sitting in traffic, and one of them is driving, the other one, a younger one, is just sort of looking, waiting for the traffic to clear, looking ahead, and he notices the car in front of him. It's a new BMW. It's a nice, a new model. And he watches, and the driver is smoking, and the driver takes a drag on a cigarette, and then the driver flicks the ashes onto the car. And the police officer is stunned by that and thinks, did I see that right? You know, who does that to your new car? And if you borrow it from a friend, would you do it to a friend's car? Who would do a thing like that? Maybe somebody who has obtained the use of that car illegally. And so they pull the driver over. Sure enough, it's a stolen car. Okay, so that's an example of an insight. It's not about somebody putting different pieces together to come up with a new idea. It's somebody realizing that the pieces don't fit together, that there's a contradiction. So that's a type of insight that occurs. Other examples are Darwin wondering about the variety of different species that he had observed during the Beagle expedition, and why do these different species evolve, and what's pushing it? And then he reads a book by Malthus about competition for resources, and all of a sudden, wow, that's it. It's survival of the fittest and the competition for resources. That's the engine that drives evolution. And so those are the kinds of examples that we see of people forming insights and coming up with new understanding. But there's a second reason why insights have value to companies today. That's a little more complex. And the reason is companies right now, you see a huge trend towards trying to come up with more powerful calculations to understand how to run businesses. And you know, we talk about big data. We talk about the availability of much more data we've had before, and the availability of more powerful analytic tools for crunching the data. And we talk about the availability of computational power, the computers that can run those programs. And so people are looking at better ways to crunch the numbers to come up with answers. And insights are a complement to that. I'm not saying that these approaches are flawed. They're extremely valuable, extremely powerful. But insights come in when the calculations aren't going to be enough. Insights come in when we deal with wicked problems where there's no clear right answer. Insights come in when some of the data that we've been relying on may be wrong. And we have to discover that rather than continue to crunch those numbers because they're the wrong numbers. Insights come in when we've been making the wrong assumptions. And so the number crunching can go off in a useless direction because our assumptions are flawed, and it takes insights to make that discovery that there's something wrong with our thinking. So I think insights are an important complement for businesses that are maybe becoming too focused on number crunching.
Well, you've raised a couple of points here that I think I'd like to explore a bit further. I mean, first of all, if a company is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, then you rely on your intuition a lot. And I love the distinction you made between intuition, which is the using patterns you've already learned, and insight, which is the discovery of whole new patterns. So it's to me that opening is seeing things where, seeing new patterns which are really sparked by an anomaly. It's sparked by things not lining up as per usual, the missing piece, so to speak. What do companies do to get in their own way around innovation with respect to using an insight for that opening? And innovation in my world is as simple as, how do we organize ourselves better so we make better decisions, we get things done, and we create a healthy workplace. What are companies doing right now to block that capacity to use insights more effectively?
That's a painful topic. That was one of the most discouraging parts of my research, was encountering all these companies that believe that they want innovation, they want insights, they make these claims, but they don't act in that way. They act just the reverse. And the reason they act in the opposite direction is to have a smoothly running company, you want everything predictable. You want everything smooth and running according to plan. And insights aren't part of that. Insights are disruptive. Insights are disorganizing. So for an organization that values predictability and having things move in a regular schedule, insights become a problem. And the more dramatic the insight, often you find the greater the resistance. So that's why companies block insights. And the way they do it, they become really extremely concerned about errors. And they go to excessive steps to try to prevent any kinds of errors. And the actions that they take get in the way of insights. So what companies will do, they'll increase the number of reviews. And each reviewer the job of the reviewer is to make sure that no error could creep in to the plan. And so they're looking at it from the point of view of where are the mistakes rather than where are the opportunities, where are the discoveries. So you increase the number of reviews, you increase the number of controls, you have people try to follow checklists and procedures because that makes it easy to see if somebody missed a step or if they carried out a step incorrectly. So all of this is in the service of stamping out errors. You have people document their reasoning more carefully, and so people are consumed by that kind of busy work, and they don't have the space to form insights.
Interesting. And I think it's that quest for certainty, predictability, and the use of controls that blocks innovation, period. Just because they're too busy trying to keep everything under control, when in fact the easiest way to gain that is to release the control and allow things to show up.
That's scary for companies because they want predictability, they want things running smoothly, and they're afraid to let go, and they're afraid to trust the insights and the skills of their workers.
Now, you've hit on the fundamental point, I think, and that's trust. What, in your experience, between the book you've just done on insights and the ones you've done previously on decision making, what is it that will help companies get over that fear and release that concern with controlling the world? Their world, that is.
Yeah, that's another great question. Most companies can't. It's not in their DNA. When they think of managing, their idea of managing is get everything specified, get your plan laid out carefully, and it's scheduled. When each task is supposed to start, when it's supposed to finish. All of that emerges when you don't really trust the judgment of the people who are working underneath you. And so you need to control very carefully what they do every step of the way because you're not sure they're good enough. And so it's hard to change a culture when that's the way you've grown up and that's the way you've structured yourself. The companies that seem to, and another issue that comes up is as the companies become more successful, there's more they can lose, and so the consequences of errors become more frightening. So even a company that starts out trusting itself, trusting its workers, trusting its ability to improvise and innovate, as it becomes bigger and has more workers and more successful, even then they just become frightened about what could go wrong. So it's really hard to maintain a culture of innovation. What could a company do to move in the other direction? Well, we're starting some discussions with companies right now that realize they've gone too far in that direction. And the first part is to look at the balance between how much they do that's in the service of reducing errors and how much do they do that's in the service of increasing expertise and increasing insight. And for most companies, when I talk about this, they say we're all about reducing errors. We do very little about increasing insights other than putting inspirational posters on the wall.
Which has limited effect. I'm glad to hear that those conversations are happening and that there's companies curious enough to recognize that they're in the place. You talk a little bit about curiosity in the book. Tell me more about curiosity and its role in finding insights and in innovation, if you will.
Okay, so let me put that in the context. When I collected 120 examples of insights, and I tried to see if they all had a common path, and they didn't. I found there were three major paths that emerged. One of them was noticing contradictions, and we've talked about that before, like the police officer seeing that the driver flick his ashes. Another one is what I'm calling creative desperation, where you know you're stuck and you don't know why, and you're trying to find out what assumption you're making that might be wrong. But the third path is about making connections. And sometimes there's different things that occur, and you put those together and you realize that you can run with it. But sometimes it's simply curiosity. Something happens and you say, what is that all about? I need to investigate that. So it's not the insight itself, and we can't investigate everything that strikes our fancy, but it's having enough experience and enough judgment to determine this is worth my time. This could lead us down some promising avenues. And so curiosity becomes a key resource for individuals and for organizations to be nourished, rather than to be stamped out by having people following steps to perform jobs in a way that doesn't promote creativity.
Einstein's discoveries come to mind when you mentioned curiosity in that light.
That Einstein's discoveries?
Yeah, the idea of riding light beams and so forth is remarkable, you know?
Right, yeah. I mean, he started engaging in those thought experiments when he was 16. And he was just sort of wondering, and he didn't know that 10 years later it was going to lead to the theory of special relativity. That wasn't on his agenda. He just became curious. He said, what would happen if, and he just imagined himself in these different situations, and he kept following the logic and following the curiosity, and made some fundamental discoveries that had escaped all the other physicists at the time.
Well, and I have to say that when I first thought of the book, your conversation here and our conversation today, the first business innovation that I thought of was the Postit note, which was actually a mistake, which is, I think, one of the more brilliant mistakes ever made. And definitely the insight was gained when somebody looked at that and went, whoa, this is a whole, they just looked at it differently. They didn't look at it as a mistake. They saw it as being a practical solution to a problem we didn't know we had.
Right, and that's when you talked about companies and what they can do, that's part of a culture change, is to be open to those kinds of accidents and those kinds of anomalies and those opportunities. And instead of saying, well, you messed up, is saying, but what do we have here, and being curious about what it might do for us. Now, the person who invented Post-it notes, later on, people talked about some of the error-reducing approaches that have been imposed in businesses, such as Six Sigma, where you want to stamp out errors and you want to make sure you don't have any chance of going down a wrong path. And he said, if Six Sigma had been enforced way back when, I never would have discovered Post-it notes.
Yeah. That makes a heck of a lot of sense. Now, I know from the story, by the way, you're a brilliant storyteller. I've never seen such a wonderful array of experiences that reveal the point over and over again. When you relayed some of the stories about companies, perhaps it was some of the things that sort of where people tried to wave the flag internally in companies and they just haven't been heard. And yet here we are at a place where we're saying, hey, those places are the ones where you want to turn and place more attention, look at it more seriously. there's a sense of judgment that needs to be applied to that. And not only that, there's a question around where do we begin? How do we begin in resurrecting the capacity for spotting insights in companies and knowing what they represent instead of trying to squash out the potential for them? Do you have any advice you would give someone Monday morning on how to think about this in a different way so that we gain more than we lose?
Right. This is the problem where you have a corporate chain of command, and it only takes one person in that chain to say, "Nah, I don't want to pass this up. I don't want to pass this along," and now the ideas never get to the top, and so the company is protected, and the cocoon is protected from its own good ideas. So what can you do? Because you need some sort of chain of command. So one approach that people have suggested, not just me, is try to have some relief valve along the way. So no good idea can be killed by just one person in one office. That if you think the idea is being throttled, there's some lateral approach that you can bring it elsewhere so that it can be reviewed, so that you're not at the mercy of the most risk-averse, cautious individual in the entire chain. So that's one thought that we have. Another is in terms of trying to change culture. Corporations often have lessons learned sessions when something wrong has happened. They say, why did it happen? How can we prevent it from happening again? But they don't have lessons learned session when something right has happened. And they don't celebrate insights. They don't gather the insight stories. They don't send people out to find out where did this idea come from? How did it make it through our chain of command? What did we do right? And how can we do more of it? And so I think steps like that might be possible if organizations were really serious about promoting insight and innovation.
Well, I agree, and I think really a lot of these kinds of problems are in the purview of organizations that still operate using a command and control management style, where the authorities are embedded in the hierarchical structure. Some of the newer companies that are coming forward are not operating that way at all. They're operating with more of a flat and more fluid organization, and so they encourage that kind of conversation. They encourage the anomalies. It's a completely different approach. And therefore, they're much more responsive and a whole lot more nimble to what's going on the outside.
Right. And we're seeing, and I think the software community has helped lead the way because they realize that command and control approach was just killing them. So the organizational structure is going to make a difference. The organizational policy, the official policy, may make a difference, but we've all heard policy statements that don't mean anything. I think what really sends a message to the organization is who gets promoted. Do you promote the people who you can trust never to make a mistake, or do you promote the people who are just bubbling with ideas and enthusiasms, and in fact may take some, waste some resources going exploring exploring ideas that don't get you anywhere, but at least they're trying to explore as opposed to trying to be safe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exciting. Now, can you tell us a bit more about where people can find your book and learn more? Because huge value in this conversation and huge value to companies now that are saying they want innovation and then working hard to prevent it.
So the easiest way to get the book would be on Amazon.com, and I know that Amazon.com isn't always accessible outside the United States, but I assume it would be available to listeners in Canada.
We've got a lot of people that listen to this program are based in Europe as well. So you'll find it, basically look on Amazon. It's called Seeing What Others Don't. And for more information on on flat organizations. I've been running something called Stowe Sparks, and we just did an interview with Doug Kirkpatrick from the Self-Management Institute on that topic. So that's STOOS. Actually, go to my website, FromInsightToAction.com, and you'll see it posted there. Gary, I want to thank you very much for being on the program today. Is there any parting thoughts, any parting insight you can offer the listeners today on the whole business of seeing what others don't?
The one last thought is that a lot of the famous examples of insights are dramatic, people winning Nobel Prizes, things like that. But the fact is, we all have insights all the time. We make these unexpected shifts. We come up with these discoveries, and we don't give it, and we don't appreciate it enough. We don't celebrate it enough. And I think it would be valuable for all of us. Instead of condemning ourselves when we make mistakes, to pat ourselves on the back when we form insights, and to just realize what a strength that is for us all.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the hazards of preventing mistakes is that you don't learn how to make better decisions. I think you pointed that out very well in your other books. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Well, and thank you for being here, Gary. I'm looking forward to having some more conversations with you.
That would be great.